This is King Noble Black Supremacy, and with this particular video I want to talk about the Starbucks racial event, the controversial Starbucks racial event. And I want to talk about how these racial events in America, these viral, overly publicized and politicized racial events, further perpetuate the illusion of inclusion in America. It's a lot I could have said about the Starbucks event, but I guess I'll speak on that which others will not. I'll break some new ground on this for you. That the illusion of inclusion in America for black people needs more racial circumstances, more racial situations, more events that show blatant discrimination based on race. And that's actually the only liberality that we have in America. That's the only equality that we have, or justice that we may experience, is when events like that happen. Like our idea of being a part of America and being accepted lives from one racial event to another, from one shooting to one hate crime to one blatant event to the other. There's been no progress as far as racism in this country whatsoever. But this illusion of progress is shown in an approach to racial events. Now I'll simplify this for you. This is the best time to go to Starbucks right now, because this blatant act of discrimination we saw with the two black gentlemen getting arrested for trespassing, for just waiting on somebody at Starbucks. That event has created such outcry and has exposed racism in America to such capacity that now they want to do the opposite. They want to pretend as though they're not racist. They want to perpetuate the illusion of inclusion temporarily. Now, we know racism existed in Starbucks, discrimination existed in Starbucks in a very subtle and underground way, on more subtle levels, not as blatant as the two guys getting arrested. Every single day they are discriminating against blacks in Starbucks, but it's so subtle, so subconscious, so a part of capitalism and marketing and business in this society, so ingrained within this society that it goes unseen and unnoticed. And it's actually okay, it's actually acceptable. And it's not until you have a blatant act of discrimination and racism does the racism that actually exists there get any attention. And it'll only get attention temporarily. And eventually all of this will die down. All this controversy around it will die down, and then it will go back to business as usual. So this is like the best time right now to get your fill up on the illusion of inclusion. I bet you they'll treat you very well in Starbucks right now. They'll seem very apologetic. You'll see more white guilt than you ever seen. You'll actually see the opposite of racism. You'll see reverse racism by whites, where they'll be racist against whites just to show that they're not racist against blacks. They'll go to the furthest extent to prove that we're not racist and we've changed as a country and we want to do something about this. So this is the best time to go to Starbucks, because they're so sorry. So sorry. So sympathetic. But that's going to die out. That's only going to last for a little while. So go get your illusion of inclusion fill up right now. Get your cup of illusion of inclusion. Go get your cup of that. Get you at least some extra shots in there. You know what I'm saying? Get a double espresso or whatever they call it of the illusion of inclusion. And they're going to challenge blatant, bold, outward racism That's the only thing that they're going to be dealing with. But the subtle forms of racism will go on as usual. Because the blatant forms of racism exposes them and makes you even bring their subtle forms of racism to the table. So we just want to deal with the subtle, with the bold ones. So they say they're going to shut down 8,000 stores to have racial bias training for 2 hours. 8,000 shops to show that, hey, we're not racist. Things have changed. We need to tackle this issue. We love our black customers. We're not racist. We need to address this because this doesn't represent the corporate mindset. Our illusion of freedom and human dignity and justice in this country needs more racial circumstances and situations. Our freedom and justice rise the wave of racial events where we have some type of victory, it appears. In the meantime of those situations, we're treated as second-class citizens, as undesirables, and in many cases, invisible. These situations only bring that there is a black population in America to visibility because they forgot about us. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's deal with these niggers again, these Afro-Americans, these ex-slaves. Let's deal with them. I mean, that's tragic when your human dignity, justice, and freedom needs racial circumstances and events. Or otherwise, your identity, your humanity slips between the cracks of this country. I think that's sadder and sicker than the actual event itself in Starbucks. I think it's worse than those 2 men getting arrested. Because this happens all the time. It gets no attention that blacks are arrested and treated with discrimination all the time. No attention, no cameras. It doesn't matter. That's just how things are. That's just the policies. That's just the way we operate. It's not racism. And it won't get seen or noticed. But we have one window, a very short window of that somebody cares. When a racial event is staged, is put before the great stage, and is propagandized and gone viral and put into the media and before everyone, that's just our little window of somehow America care about us and was set up for us, and they just made a mistake. It was just a mistake, and they were uneducated. They don't understand how things have changed, and we forget that that's the standard of business. That's the way it goes. Because these events have happened before and they've been dealt with, and they continue to happen and continue to happen and continue to happen. And the problem is Starbucks has always been a racial corporation. It has always had this type of discrimination, but the problem is that Starbucks is growing right now and getting huger. That's why California wants them to put a cancer warning on the coffee. Like there's a cancer warning on the cigarettes, they want to put a cancer warning on coffee to let you know that you can die from cancer from drinking coffee, that you need to know that it produces a chemical, I think, called crinoline, and that could cause cancer. Because they're growing so big that coffee is the new crack. Coffee is the new opiate in this country. And you go to Starbucks now, and it's a line all the way around the damn town, the whole town. You can't even get in line. It's so busy because people want that crack in the morning. So now, since Starbucks is getting out of control with the distribution of these speed, you call it caffeine. They blowing up by selling this speed to everybody, and they're popping up all over the place. Now the discrimination is being more obvious. It's more blatant now because they're becoming bigger and larger, becoming everywhere. So now their racism is becoming obvious, but it's been subtle all along. It's been going on all along. They just have not been as so big as they are now. Just like cancer has always been in the coffee. It's getting so big now that it's obvious now that we have to deal with it. Them growing and becoming a very big corporation is really more of the problem that is being addressed than racism is, or than that the coffee causes cancer. They're just getting out of control and they need to be checked by somebody. Somebody needs to check them. They're becoming a staple. They're becoming a new government, a new institution, a very strong, powerful institution within America now, Starbucks. Somebody need to check them. I think that's a bigger issue. But for this small window, we get Black Lives Matter with Starbucks. And then they'll have this little racial bias training, and then it'll die down and subtle racism will continue. And then we'll wait on the next event where we can potentially feel like humans in America, while so many people are swept under the rug. So many people are treated with discrimination, are experiencing the absence of human dignity on a day-to-day basis. And we have to wait to racial events to have a feeling of the illusion of inclusion in America. That's deep. To me, that's a deeper issue. Things are never going to change, but our illusion of freedom will ride the wave of racial events. And our true identity and our true culture is reaction to racial events. That's our cultural identity in America. That's why Dr. King is so popular, Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton. Their legacies, because who we have become, the African American identity, is a reaction to racism. That's our cultural experience. Let's get back out and get our picket signs again. That's our culture. Some say, well, our culture is hip-hop, our culture is this. No, our culture is reacting to racism in this country. That is the African American identity. It exists, riding the wave of racial events, of which we have to mobilize and speak out and boycott and ban. It's been going on ever since we so-called have been freed. That has become our identity. That in order to be black in this country, you have to walk around with a picket sign on your back. That protesting has become our festival, our Mardi Gras. Protesting has become our traditional cultural reality. That shows that what America don't want us. It has not changed its attitude and its perspective, and it will not change. And the racial attitude and dynamic is entrenched into capitalism. It's a part of capitalism, the institution that drove slavery. Picking cotton and industry and business is sold into capitalism. White prosperity rides the back of black dehumanization and disparity. This is a fact. So look at that though. What's going to be the next racial event or shooting of a black person where we can get a minute amount of attention to feel human for a little while? We've become ambulance chasers of human dignity. That's the America that you live in. And you just want reform. But reform is a repetitive circumstance. It is a wheel that you riding on called reform, but it is not changing because the attitudes and the personas and the perspectives and the approaches that are essentially racist are not changing. This is why we need a revolution. This is why we need a complete and total alternative way of building our reality and building ourselves up within this country, outside of the framework of their establishment. Outside of the framework, because it is repetitive, it is redundant. They never learn, they never change. It's King Noble Black Supremacy. I just had to go in on that.